Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Skull.
I'm Zombie Cat.
And this is the Horror Den. Now, today we are covering a very requested movie by one of our fans, the Holy Parish of Doom. He's recommended this to us multiple times, so we decided to just watch it, give it a watch, give it a review, see what people thought of it. Now, before we get into it, if you like what we do here and you enjoy the video, please make sure to give us a like, a subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below your favorite part, or, just say, hey, we respond to everything.
Yep.
So
tell us what movies to watch.
yeah, if you do it enough, we'll listen. So we have a really big announcement because we are heading really close to October.
Finally!
And, as a spooky channel, that is our season. So we are proud to announce that this year we will have our first annual Horror Havoc here at the Horror Den. We will be recording and uploading 8 videos throughout the course of October, which may not seem like a lot to you that watch more famous YouTubers out there, but we only record and upload 1 video a week, so this is a big jump for us. So
and that's a lot of work, too.
That is a lot of work, a lot of preemptive work that you will probably pick up on. But if you like it, then let us know, and maybe we can work something out in the future where that becomes a little more frequent. It kind of depends on the workload with us, with our editor, with our audio guy, DMAC. So we're more than willing to see what the people want and kind of accommodate that. Yeah. But I don't think we have any other announcements. So without further ado, let's go on and get into our review of The Empty Man, directed by David Pryor. Now, there's a lot with this movie.
Before going into, neither of us have seen anything about this movie. We were both completely clueless. I think I maybe watched a snippet of a trailer and I was like, that looks cool, but I completely forgot everything about it. And
I think I remember when this movie was being advertised.
I don't remember it at all.
So, maybe that's just me thinking that I remember. But it's been recommended to us quite a few times by the fan we mentioned, and we just decided, why not? I bought it while it was on sale, and I was like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and review it.
And before we start, I highly recommend you go watch it on your own. Pick it up on DVD or streaming platforms, digital, whatever your cup of tea is. Definitely give it a watch for yourself before we spoil the whole thing for you.
Yep, so if you don't like spoilers, you have been warned. Anyway, so let's just go ahead and dive into the synopsis, because this is a long movie. It runs over 2 hours, and a lot of shit happens.
And I still don't think I understand it at all.
Yeah, shout out to another YouTuber, FoundFlix. We watched a little bit of his video with the ending explained, just because Zombie Cat over here was like, help me. So we're obviously going to miss some things because we are doing a synopsis and a discussion, but we're not going super in depth where we're not missing a single detail. So if we forget to mention something, please forgive us.
Yeah, this movie is very convoluted, I guess you can say. There's a lot.
It messes with your mind.
There's a lot going on. A lot.
So, without further ado, we will do our best, so just hang in there. So, the story begins with a group of hikers that we don't know their names yet, but they're hiking through Bhutan, which is a Asian country that's along the Himalayan mountain
It's
chain.
So beautiful.
Yes.
The shots they got were insane for this sequence.
I would never hike Mount Everest, but I want to see that landscape.
It was beautiful.
So the group of hikers approach this really cool bridge that reminds me of the bridge from Shrek, and but it's almost like a Far Cry 4 mixed in with it, where it's really long. There's this chain link across it, and it has these bells on the side and these banners. It's really cool, but that'll come up again in just a little bit. So they are up on top of this plateau or something, and
I think they reached the peak. They were a storm's about to come in, and this is our final viewpoint.
Right, should we go ahead and head down? And they were like, yeah. And then we see this guy named Paul. He's not named yet, but he's about to be. Who he hears something, and he's like, "Do you guys hear that?" And I think there is an audio cue for the audience. I think we.
It almost sounded like just a wind blowing kind of sound or something.
Yeah, and so he starts walking off in a direction on like the peak or the plateau, and then all of a sudden he just falls right into a crevice. And I remember when we were watching it, I saw him walking. I said, "He's gonna fall."
That's what I didn't think he was gonna fall down. I thought he was just going to walk off.
Oh, like walk off the edge.
Like he was in a trance and he was just gonna go straight off. I was like, "What? He won't stop."
I think that would have been terrifying in its own way.
I know. It's like he was just like, "Do you hear that?" And then just starts walking into the walk dollar.
Like a Pied Piper situation, or like Lemmings to the Slaughter, just jumping right off the edge. But anyway, so he falls down, and then the rest of the group, the other main guy, I don't think he's ever named, but he rappels down into the hole to find Paul, and he looks around. There's a lot of insects everywhere, but he finds Paul sitting crisscross, like staring blankly, almost in fear, almost like ahead of him.
Or in awe,
almost. I guess it could be either. But he shines a light, and we see this really cool skeleton.
It's fucking awesome.
It's very big, even for humanoid standards, and it has like 4 arms that are all kind of like up above it, like
it's like Goro or something.
Yeah, and he has these 2 sets of hands that are clasped in front of him. He has like 10 fingers on each hand, like undoubtedly, but it's really cool. I bet that was practical. It just looked really cool.
Oh yeah, just a skeleton. They probably could pull it.
Right. So the unnamed guy that's rappelled down here, he goes to console his friend to try to figure out what's going on, this weird scenario. And he's the friend Paul, he says in a whisper, "If you touch me, you will die." And then he like hesitates, but he's like, it's just crazy, and he snaps him out of it, and he goes into like this comatose state where almost like he's in a coma. And he carries him out, and they start hiking back down the mountain. The storm
He's carrying Paul on his freaking shoulders.
Yeah, and the storm is about to roll in. We can kind of see the wind picking up, and they find this abandoned house off the trail, and so they decide to shack up there. Paul is completely out, and he's apparently trying to think about how to say this without getting in trouble on YouTube. They find evidence when they're trying to make sure that he hasn't been bitten by any insects, that he has old scars from potential harming. That's where I'll leave that. But his wife or girlfriend, we never really know, says that he's been fine lately. So they kind of just leave it at that. And then we go into that night.
There's also, I thought it was weird, there was a lot of goats at the house, but no one lived there.
Well, it might just be wild mountain goats.
They were in a pen.
Oh. That is strange.
Makes me wonder if there's more.
I don't know.
It don't really matter because they never really come back to that. Well, they do, but not like that.
Now that they're at the house, the storm officially rolls in. Like, it snows a lot. Like, the first thing that Zombie Cat said when it pans to the next morning is, "That mountain got covered up quick."
Yeah, it did. Once again, it's beautiful, though.
I felt like this was important at the time. It turned out not to be that important. But the guy who carried Paul establishes that from this cabin, they are 5 miles from any road. Mm-hmm. I remember that, and I wrote it down just because I thought it was going to be important. It's not really that important. So Paul's wife finds this bone in his hand. And
it might not be a bone. It kind of just looked like a bone. It's some kind of flute.
It was a bone, but it's actually a pan flute sort of situation where if you blow into it, it makes a noise. And
like blowing into a bottle.
She makes a note on it while sitting in the room with him, and all of a sudden she just blacks out. Like, she just fell asleep after she did it, and she wakes up a few hours later, and she here's, I guess there's an obvious shift after that happens.
We also didn't mention when they first get to the cabin, I believe, or it might have been when they reached like the peak of the mountain. It said day 1.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty important part, as we'll get into.
It's almost kind of like a Ring scenario, 7 days.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, Zombie Cat, when we first started watching this, you mentioned that it's like you're getting some major ritual vibes.
Yeah, if there's a movie on Netflix called The Ritual that I'm obsessed with, it reminded me, the opening reminded me a lot of that.
There's an obvious shift after she blows on the bone pan flute, and she goes and her friends are asleep, and then it cuts to the next day, day 2, and she goes out into the living room, and she looks out the window, and she sees a figure standing out there, and we think that it's one of the other compatriots.
It looks so cool. It's like a Grim Reaper is like cape, like floating in the wind. It's dope.
So she goes outside and she begins to approach it, thinking that it may just be a stranger, and she's asking for help. Maybe it's the person who lived here.
Because they saw people on the way up, like a bunch of like foreigners to them, where they were like, oh, maybe it was somebody passing by, or it could be whoever owns this shack.
Right. And, she gets closer, and then she realizes that this person is probably not good. And she takes a step back. They take a step forward. She takes a step back. He takes a step forward, and she runs. And then a chase ensues all the way to the front door, where she slams the door just in the nick of time. And then we hear like the thudding on the door. And then we hear the voice of her friends come out, and it's like, let us in, unlock the damn door. And turns out they were just trying to get in. And so we don't know what that was, anything about it. So we cut forward, and the next morning, day 3, we get this really creepy shot of Ruth, the wife, is asleep, and we see Paul perched over her ear, whispering incoherently into it. It reminds me of Connect the Cuts from The Devil Inside, but that's beyond the point. Or, Haunted House, whichever you prefer. Tic-tac-toe on your bitch ass.
Tic-tac-toe in your face!
After this happens, Ruth wakes up and she looks around and Paul is not there. And so they try to figure out where he is. They open the door and they see footprints leading out into the snow, and so they decide to follow. They follow them all the way back to the bridge.
The rickety bridge.
And he is sitting crisscross, staring down, blowing on the bone pan flute. The guy gets really, pissed, and he's like, oh, you think you're so special?
Yeah, because he's like, you've been faking being still the last 2 days.
And Paul looks up at him and says, I told you. He says that a few times. And then all of a sudden, Ruth, drops a knife out of her sleeve, stabs the guy in the back. It came out of nowhere. Stabs the guy in the back and then throws him off the cliff edge. And then as she's running, slices the throat of the girl they're with and throws her off too. And then stands there and they make eye contact before
a tear rolls down Paul's eye.
And then she just steps backwards off the cliff. And then he blows into the bone flute one more time as he's peering down the bridge, and then title card.
22 minutes into the movie, and we just got a title card. We thought we were already locked in.
Right.
These are our 4 main characters.
We thought it was gonna be. We really, really, really thought it was gonna be a ritual, like you're out in the middle of nowhere and all this scary stuff is happening. Or there was a section where we thought it was gonna be a spelunking horror movie where it was like The Descent. And it just completely took our expectation and turned it on its head.
Yeah.
And it had us hooked. I will give that to this movie. Throughout the entire thing, for me personally, up until towards the end, I was hooked.
I agree.
So, we jump forward 23 years.
Yep.
To 2018, and we are now in Missouri. And we are following the track of a guy named James, who is a former police officer, and we see him running and all this other stuff, and we keep hearing every once in a while this female voice kind of echo in his head, I guess.
Where were you?
Where were you? That's important because it happens pretty much throughout the entire film. Then it cuts, he goes back home, he takes his pill and stuff, and
It's like a cycle every day. You see him do the same thing.
Right.
You see his wedding ring sitting right beside his pill bottle, and he reaches for this bottle of pills every day.
He also seems to run some kind of self-defense shop, like a gun store or something. And he's he he kind of gives a good deal to somebody. He prevents somebody from buying a pepper spray that he doesn't think is better.
Yeah, kind of just seems like a cool dude.
And he has this this coupon on his bulletin board that he takes down. It's like for a free birthday dinner or something. He goes to this like Mexican restaurant and he awkwardly hands it to him, and then they come out and they give him the happy birthday song, and he just has his face buried in his hands. It's pretty funny. But he comes home and he has a visitor that's sitting beside his decrepit pool, named Amanda. They seem to know each other. We don't really know how, but she's come to check on him to make sure that he's okay.
Like Will Byers.
With the bowl haircut.
Oh, that haircut was throwing me off the whole time. I was like, "What you doing, girl?"
But so they have this really deep talk about like really existential shit.
Yeah, like an out of nowhere, like philosophy talk on like the universe. Like nothing is real.
Well, okay, just to be more specific, because it's going to come up frequently, especially towards we get to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
She's gotten into this whole thing where it's the premise of you think it, you concentrate on it, you manifest it, and it becomes reality. This is something that I'm sure everybody's heard of at some point, where it's like if you believe something hard enough,
I think
it comes
we talked about
true.
it at the end of our. They paid me $5,000 to go through hell.
Yeah, where it's
like, how do I know that you're real?
Yeah, I mean, it's existentialism. That's really what it is. Like, it's what it all boils down to, and that's a really big point of this entire movie. So it may not seem like it at first, but you know, Amanda and him have this conversation. She leaves, and then it cuts to the next day, and Amanda has gone missing, and our main protagonist James gets a phone call from Nora, her mom, asking for help, basically. And so, you know, being the retired police officer he helps her, you know, do a police report. Police don't really seem like they're going to do anything, so he decides to take on the case.
When he's inspecting her room, he notices some weird things. There's a black poster on the wall with this symbol of, it's just a symbol for now, but he sees it's kind of weird. He goes into the bathroom, and the cops say, "Do you have any pets?" And Nora's like, "No, we don't have any pets." And she's like, "Why?" And the cop's just like, "No reason."
No reason.
But in blood written on the mirror, it says, "The empty man is what does it say?
The empty man made me do it.
Yeah, the empty man made me do it.
You know, that just seems pretty creepy in and of itself. Like, maybe she's already gone, but we'll get more into that as we go on. So, he asks Nora to give him a list of all of the friends that she hangs out with regularly. And the first one that he contacts is this girl named Devara. The first one that she gives him is this girl named Devara, and he goes and finds her at school, and they have a conversation while they're sitting in the car. And
For a smoke.
For a smoke. In exchange for a smoke. I can't blame her. But there's this really cool scene where they're talking, and she looks out the window, and we see this crowd of people as this bus passes, and then we see the empty man standing behind this crowd of people. And we were like, we had to rewind it a few times just to make sure that we didn't miss it.
Wait, what was that?
What was that? But, you know, they have a conversation, and then when the topic of the empty man comes up, she explains to James that there is this myth and legend where if you are out at night on a bridge and you blow into a bottle and you think about the empty man, he will come after you. On
day one, you
hear
him. Day two, you see him. Day three, he gets you.
Yeah, you feel him.
This is one of, what was her name? Amanda. Yeah. This is one of Amanda's friends, and they all went to this bridge.
Yeah, there was like 6 of them.
Yeah, they all went to this bridge together one night, and as they were leaving, there's also like a cool, like, it looked like a sewer cap, but it leads to like an underground, under the bridge.
Like a catwalk.
Yeah, it's spooky. But they come up, they're about to leave. Amanda's kind of being weird, talking about her philosophy kind of stuff that she's been getting into. And she brings up the game of the empty man, and
they all blow into the bottle.
They all get peer pressured into doing it, especially
That one guy that's never named.
Or the girl the cop is talking to, Devara, she really didn't want to do it.
Yeah, she just half-assed like, you happy?
Yeah.
But so after this, she leaves James, and as she gets out, there's this row of students that are all sitting crisscross, and in unison they all look at her. It's really cool, really creepy.
All of her friends?
I don't remember if it was all of her friends.
I thought it was all of her friends lined up.
That might be it.
But at the same time, wouldn't she just be like, they're right there? They're all...
Yeah, that is true. I think it's a bunch of strangers, which I think makes it even creepier.
Yeah.
Which, knowing how
knowing
how the movie ends, I have some theories. I think it was strangers. So, after we see the good scare of, like, the meditating people, which I think were strangers, we cut to James going to the bridge that was mentioned by Devara. And he walks down and he finds the same bottle that Amanda left, and he jokingly blows into it. Guess what? Not a good choice.
I feel like at first he went to all of their houses and he was like, all of those kids are missing.
Yeah, he goes to all of their houses before they go there, and he can't find any of them.
Like,
and there was
literally all of them are gone.
There was this one house that he goes to where he finds a dead dog with buckets of blood next to it, which is pretty disturbing. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
But he goes to the bridge, he finds a bottle, jokingly blows into it. Haha, bad choice. Then goes down through the manhole cover onto the catwalk, and he shines a light, and he finds the kids. They're all hanging underneath the bridge.
Yeah, it's super gnarly. They could have used this as a really cheap, loud noise jump scare, but they didn't, and I really appreciated that because it added to like the what is going on kind of deal. Like this is bad.
But also next to their corpses is "The empty man made me do it," written
also,
in blood.
All of their bodies are there except for Amanda
and Devara. Those are the only two people missing.
And I think he calls the cops and they just swarm the bridge.
Yeah, he calls the cops. The cops come. Meanwhile, we see Devara at some kind of spa, getting ready to go in the sauna. She goes in. The cloudiness. You can see a figure beginning to form opposite end of her. She gets attacked by the empty man and stabbed, but by herself and by the empty man at the same time, I guess. And she is murdered in the sauna. Yeah,
it's like you see him doing the motion, but then it cuts to her as well.
And she's doing it.
This movie's kind of mixed on it. We'll get to this later. Well, it's just, I don't know.
To be clear, we liked the movie.
Yeah.
So if anything we say makes you think that otherwise, no, we did like it. But it's just we got some things we got to discuss when we get to that point.
Yeah.
So, she gets killed in the sauna. It's revealed later that another message was found next to her on the floor of the empty man made me do it. And we cuts to the detective talking to James at a table, and he's basically like, this has happened before at another place in Missouri. There was a woman who fed her infant to a pack of stray dogs because it was whispering to her.
And this is something I'm so happy they didn't show because it made my mind explode with creepiness. He said that she heard the infant baby whispering into her ear while she slept. I was like, oh, that is horrifying. That's
Can you
great.
just imagine like this premature infant just up
like
in your ear?
Ouija Origin of Evil, the little girl.
Oh yeah, that's another movie we'll get to eventually. Also, something that we need to point out, it's kind of happened periodically through the movie, but we keep seeing this flyer at all of these kids' rooms where it's talking about...
It's that same logo that I mentioned earlier.
It's the Partifacts Institute. I think that's how you say it. But throughout his investigation, he does some research about him. Turns out that it's actually called the Partifact Society, which is a doomsday cult that has actually been connected to some kind of like experimental deaths happened to some people up in a cabin in Missouri. And there was a written thing on the back of the one that Amanda had that said tulpa, which is actually a form of Buddhism, which is what she was talking about, which is the manifestation, which is all about, thoughts plus focus equals, thoughts plus focus plus time equals flesh or manifestation. So
flesh, whatever that means.
Yeah, well, I think that on the wiki page it means like it becomes physical rather than abstract. Later that night, Nora, Amanda's mom, comes to visit James at his house. It's kind of implied that they have some kind of history.
She brought him some Chinese food.
Yeah, because apparently she knows him well enough to know that he didn't think to eat. She asks if she can stay the night, and there are obviously some boundaries in place for some reason. I bet you can wager some guesses already. But we cut to, she leaves after getting emotional, and we see James that night asleep. He wakes up at 3:03 just as it transitions to 3:04. That's important. And his door is open, which, like I said when I watched the movie, I will forever stand by this. Only a psychopath sleeps with their door open. I cannot stand that. I don't know why. It's just, why would you ever? I mean, I'm sure that there are some of you watching this that would be comfortable with doing that. I'm not saying that you necessarily are a psychopath.
Childhood trauma, that's what it is.
Well, I used to be scared of doors being closed when I was a kid. Now I'm scared of doors being open. Like, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel open.
Well, now they can be creeping around right outside your door and you wouldn't see it.
Well, I also lived by the philosophy of I can't see it, it can't hurt me, which I know is definitely not true. But someone is in the house. We hear him creeping around, and James closes the door, grabs his baseball bat, which is pretty clever, and we see and hear them get closer, and we see the shadow on the floor, and then it just turns around and leaves. And James goes over, opens the door, and his front door is open. So it is obvious that someone was in the house.
I think he does it twice, because the first time I think he's like, oh, it's just nothing. But then he goes back out, and this time the door is swung wide open.
He doesn't go out twice. It just, this specific thing happens twice. Except the second time. We'll get to that. Anyway. So, he decides to go to the Institute. And he goes in and he talks to this girl, and he's trying to fill out, this is a weird questionnaire, by the way, if you like pause it and really look at it. But it's all about where your brain's at in terms of like being a part of the first step of this organization. And he goes in, sits, and listens to the speaker, which is played by the guy who plays Bill Dauterive in King of the Hill.
Dauterive.
We had to mention it. It comes up too much on this channel for us not to mention it. He also plays Eddie the Vampire on True Blood, if you've watched that. Anyway, I promise I will not bring that up more. I'm probably going to bring it up more. So he has this long talk about, the existentialism that Amanda was talking about, and about how like loss is not real and all this other jazz. And then he finishes it by mentioning by name the Empty Man. And of course, this raises red flags in every viewer's minds, and including that of James. So James decides to go speak with. And I
wanted to mention, there's a scene later involving phones. And watching Foundflix's video and rehearing what he said, he does mention something about technology. Like, it's supposed to be like I can't remember exactly what it said, but...
Well, this guy says that technology robs our memory.
So it's like them not even looking at it is like, there's no memory of that because it's, I don't know.
They were so absorbed in something else. But he goes and talks to the speaker afterwards, and they have this really, he takes the time to talk to James, which was kind of weird in and of itself.
Join our cult.
Yeah, join our cult, very much so. I see something in you kind of deal. And then he offhandedly says, I'm glad you came back.
He was like, first time I've been here.
Which, that put up a flag in my brain instantly. So, obviously, either he's been here before and doesn't know it, or the speaker is mistaking him, which I doubt, or there's something else that we don't know. So he goes deeper into this cult church, like barracks. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, there's a lot hidden underneath the surface.
But he like kind of goes off the beaten path and he goes underneath and there's like this like barracks room and he sees these people sitting there meditating / praying at another one of these black posters with the little symbol down at the bottom. And
yeah, that was a scary shot.
Yeah, and he goes down onto this catwalk and he sees this like, it almost looks like a grief counseling like
in
group.
the room also where the people were praying, they were praying to that black poster with just that logo on the bottom right of the church, and there was an intercom repeating the same thing over and over and over,
almost like a hypnosis kind of deal, or like a tenets thing, I guess. I don't know. But he sees this like grief counseling looking thing down below, and they're all like talking, and he makes a noise. And they're trying to like conjure something, obviously.
Yeah.
And they were like, "We hear you. Make yourself known." And then we hear another noise down from below him, which this will come up again later. But we hear noise, and they're like,
yeah. At first, he thinks they hear him, but they heard something down the hall from them.
The first noise was him. The second noise was not. And then, you know, they all take out these bottles and they blow into them to summon the empty man, I guess. And then he makes another noise, I think. And then the lights come on and there's these 2 bodyguards that are like, "Sir, come with us." And he's like, "Sorry for interrupting, guys. You know, hey." And he gets kicked out. And he's back in the alleyway where we see him talk to another guy that he saw in the lobby and kind of talk to him. He's like, "Hey, do you know this girl?" Who obviously lied. And he's like, you know, these people are kind of crazy. You know, they're really out there, like on the outer rim out there. And then says that Amanda has been moved to the cabins up in like the forest that they have. And she's gone there for pre-classification, I think it's called.
I don't know. She's like moving on up in the cult.
Yeah, she was pre-released. Pre-release is the phrase. So she's basically going there to be like fully initiated into the cult almost, and then like given a title like of authority of some sort. And so James decides to go there. And when he does go there, I don't think it's ever blatantly said, but these are the same cabins that was mentioned in the like the news articles about the experiments where people died. But he finds some files, and every single one of the kids has a file. And he finds a red file with his name on it.
And it's empty.
It's empty. And he's like, "Oh, you guys are funny. You guys are really funny." Because there was a camera in the previous shot, so I guess he thought that they heard him. And so they planted this here knowing he would go there next. So then he goes into cabin number 2, which is the cabin from the aforementioned event. And he finds this VHS tape which says manifestation number 13, which in the previous shot, he goes through like this library down below the institute, and we see very briefly, if you catch it, there is this like binder almost that says manifestation number 14. So we're talking about it in the moment. It's like, it must have been like the same thing, like just a secondary event. But he pops in the VHS tape and we see this guy who apparently is like possessed looking.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
And he is like digging out his organs. I know.
I couldn't make it out because then they show him again and he didn't have...
Right, he's getting blood from himself. And he's making this drawing of what we suppose is the empty man.
It's like in the same form of the effigy that we saw at the beginning of the movie.
Right, and it's on the wall in the cabin right next to where James is standing.
Yeah, he turns around and it's literally right there.
There's a teddy bear that's kind of falling apart, sitting over at the edge, and we see it move.
Yeah, it looks up at him.
Yeah, and then it disappears from the shot, which was pretty cool. I feel like that could have went somewhere else, but it didn't. It went somewhere, but not where I thought it was going to go. So he leaves the cabin, and he walks across this like path that's kind of over like a creek, and there's a big pond, and across it we see this large group of people around a gigantic bonfire.
It's haunting.
Like chanting, running around. It looks like a circle pit. And then they just all stop at the same time, and they're like waving really fast, all in
the
unison.
flame starts like building up like the size of a tower, and the main character, he looks up at the sky and it like warps almost.
This warping has happened a few times.
And then he like focuses back in, and they're standing still, I believe.
Yeah, the bonfire's out.
Yeah, there's no bonfire at all. There's just like a big overhead football-sized light or something like that.
Yeah, and they're standing there looking in his direction.
And then the light turns off, and you just hear the walking of all these people, and that was just the biggest nope.
But they get to, like right there on the water line, and we have a callback to the very beginning where he takes a step back, the entire group takes a step forward, he takes a step back, they take a step forward, and this is where all of the points from humor in this whole movie is going to go. He looks at these people and goes, yeah, nope, and starts running. And these people start running after him.
Like feral. They turn into like werewolves, not literally, but they're like arms flailing around and
they go
snorting.
Full feral ghoul from Fallout.
Yeah, like they are.
And like he runs all the way back to his car, and they're attacking his car, and he backs up. They're still chasing. They look like ants coming after him, like World War Z almost. But he makes a getaway. He goes to the cops to tell them what was going on, and
they're freaking questioning him, like pretty ticked at him, because they're like, did you really break into like a freaking, did you trespass? Essentially,
did you
because
put
that
our
ruins
whole,
everything.
Yeah, you put our whole investigation at risk. And, you know, okay. Then after this little spat with the police, he goes to Nora's house, convinced that she is going to be watched and followed, and like this cult is up to something more. He tells her she has to leave, that she has to go somewhere safe, so he takes her to a hotel. And at this point, it's pretty obvious that they had some kind of affair at some point. I felt like it was that pretty obvious at that point. And then we see that night, James wakes up at 3:03 just as it transforms into 3:04. The door is open yet again. Why did you do this to yourself, James? And he walks over, and we see kind of like what looks like a pile of clothes almost. And then all of a sudden, the empty man's head pops out from behind the steps.
Starts chasing him.
And chasing him down into the room. And they have like, I think he jumps over the bed, and then like the empty man goes after him, and then he's gone. It's a jump scare, but at the same time, it was pretty good. It wasn't like a jump scare. It was just like a oh god, you know, one of those scenarios where you're trying to figure out what's happening, but it's all happening so quick. And then the next day it says day 3. He's seen him now, and so now we're in the 3rd day, and he follows a group of people from the Institute, one of the guys that he spoke to previously, and he has the teddy bear in the back seat. Which, I mean, I understand it later, but at the time it was just kind of funny. He follows them, which they pick up like 8 freaking people in this car.
It's one of those old school, just like box cars almost, but just they keep picking people up, and it's so funny as he's like following them, picking people up. Like you can see the back end of the car scraping the pavement, like sparks are flying because there's so many people in this car.
But they go to a hospital, and he follows them through the hospital until they finally come to this hospital room where there's this guy laying comatose in the bed. He looks a little older, and they all, in unison, kneel in front of him. And he is basically like, what's this guy's deal? So he waits kind of outside for these people to disband, and then he comes around a corner and surprises the dude that he's talked to a few times, and like beats him up and like throws him in the
pepper sprays
him and throws him in the car. And the shot that Zombie Cat was talking about earlier is that while this is going on, we look around and there's a bunch of people around, but they're all like invested in their phones and have no recollection like of what's going on. So it's like technology has robbed them of their memory of what's going on at the moment. And so he drives off to a secluded location, and there it's revealed like that this guy knows that he has seen the empty man and that it's a part of something bigger and all this other deal. So he beats the shit out of him and leaves him there as he's laughing. And he goes...
Yeah, this dude won't get told like anything. Like he's being told the same thing over and over. he uploads it and we receive it.
Yeah, he says that the guy in the hospital, he's basically an antenna for the empty man to speak through him. And so he goes back to the hospital that night, goes in there, talks really weirdly with a nurse there, and, reveals that this guy is a John Doe, that there's not much known about him, as much as she can divulge. And then she says that he gets visitors all the time. There's actually one here right now. And he rounds the corner, and there's Amanda inside. And he goes in, has this talk with her, and then, this right here, this is when shit goes off the rails.
Yeah.
Completely. And it's revealed to him that he is not a real person, that the Institute made him up 3 days ago, like he basically engineered him, and that he is meant to replace Paul, the guy on the bed from the very beginning, as the vessel for the empty man. And once this is revealed, when I tell you that this was so hard to follow, we got a headache.
Yeah, it gets very convoluted.
But we go through these things where he's having like a bunch of flashbacks about, the day that he was at his Amanda's dad's funeral, comforting, his friend's wife. And then later on they go to the house for like I guess, I don't want to call it a reception, but it's like the wake almost. And, he stays behind to, I guess, help clean up. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The family leaves, and while he's boning the widow, Nora, his wife and kid die in a car accident.
Yeah, they swerved off the road avoiding a deer.
And the "where were you" is like his wife's voice and stuff like that. But none of that's real if what Amanda's saying is true.
Yeah, this is where it just kind of falls off.
But he goes back to his house and it's empty. And he walks down to his bedroom where he opens the door and it leads into the hospital room where Paul is laying. And he pulls out his gun. Also during this whole time, there's like a whole chase sequence with the empty man, where the empty man actually like comes into a liquid and goes into his throat, like possessing him almost. And then, the house situation happens. He opens the door. He's in the hospital room with Paul. He pulls out his gun and just blows Paul's brains out all over the wall. And he shoots him quite a number of times.
Yeah. I think he empties his clip.
Yeah, and then he just turns around and walks outside the room, and there's all these orderlies and nurses and stuff like that, and they just look at him, and then they all fall to their knees kneeling. And we have a zoom in on James's face. Credits. And that was the empty man. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest about this movie, is that it had me, and then it didn't.
Yeah, I feel like it tried to overachieve what it did. It's like, it's so long. It's so long. This movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes.
So, like, I don't even think that it tried to overachieve. Okay. It started to lose me earlier than it lost me. I'm not saying this is a bad movie by any means. I'm glad that, our fan recommended it to us. And I'm glad
I had a great time watching
because this is a movie I've never seen and I probably wouldn't have watched it otherwise. But it's one of those things where I feel like the whole cult inclusion wasn't needed.
It felt like it was just gonna be a boogeyman movie, and that would have been fine with me, to be honest. It feels like they were trying to go so deep into this philosophical, like, brain teaser kind of like just thing that it's so convoluted that it just splats a little bit.
Like I told you right from like maybe the first hour of the movie, it's like this looks and seems like a very traditional Call of Cthulhu story, where it's like, yeah, there is a cult, but like the main story is all about this random event happens, this normal person gets involved, and then they get sucked into the wills of this eldritch being, and then there's no way out. Which is exactly what happens. Like, there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, I feel like once they like put all this focus on the cult, they lost me. Like, a lot. Like,
because
it really
it's like it's
bugs
separated
me
from there actually being a creature, being the empty man, because it's like it's more the cult than the empty man.
Right. Which
is weird, because it's like, I'm not trying to sound like, oh, I want a basic monster movie. It's not like that. It's just like the way The Ritual did it was so much better. It was just like they're stranded in the woods and can't get out, and then they find out at the very end, oh shit, there was this cult, and it's like,
I think that I would have been okay if we would have stayed in the movie that was established in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah,
No offense to like what they did with like James.
Yeah, because I was hooked the entire time until it just got to be like too much to explain. And we also didn't even get into like the time conundrum of like when he walked into that like circle of people, it was actually him that made the noise, and he was also...
Yes, like there's a lot we didn't cover in that confusing bit because we just wanted to give you the meat and potatoes. That's what we gave you. But I mean, I would still suggest watch it for yourself. Like, you make your own opinions. Like, maybe we're being a little too harsh. I don't know, but like, it's just for me personally. Like, if
apparently,
it was,
from what we heard from Foundflix, this movie bombed pretty hard. And it's also just so long.
I feel like this horror movie came out at a time where if it was as like simple and clear cut, even with like the Cthulhu-esque elements that we're talking about, I feel like it would have easily fell into a bad category like the Bye Bye Man and stuff like that. The stuff that came out around the time.
Yeah, it's way better than stuff like that. Yeah.
So I can't really complain because I mean it really tried something, like not something new necessarily, but something interesting. It really took an interesting approach.
I just think it tried too much.
Yeah, I think
the whole Amanda story, I kept forgetting she was even a character. I was like, oh yeah, that's the whole reason we're even on this journey. I was like, oh, it's Amanda. I completely forgot about you.
Like, I just think that it would have been a lot more compelling for me as an individual viewer if I was watching this and I was saying to myself, okay, this cop is trying to find this group of missing persons and he doesn't realize it, but they have accidentally summoned this eldritch demon, and now he has it latched onto him, and now he's trying to find a way out, but there is no way out when it comes to things of that nature. I'm okay with there is no happy ending.
Yeah, but that's not an issue at all. It's just, you'd have to watch it to understand, really. It's just so convoluted. A lot of this stuff could have been cut a lot, but it really couldn't because they had to do it in the way of like, we wanted to fit all of that into 2 hours, and it's like, you should have just taken pieces out that was like...
I will also say this. I think what really lost me, like, I would have been okay with all the confusingness, and because I mean, like, right there towards the end, like maybe 30 minutes before the end, I looked at Zombie Cat and I said, I bet he's the vessel.
Yeah,
I really did call it, and I was just like,
it did feel kind of predictable, but it's even just the way when it's supposed to be the reveal moment, I was more like, what?
I think even if that's how the movie would have gone, like, oh, he's the vessel, then he gets possessed, and then this eldritch entity has this meat suit that he's like parading in the world, I would have been okay with that, like, even with all the convoluted complicated mess, because that's kind of how like Lovecraftian style is. It's supposed to mess with your brain.
They also didn't really go into how the hell they did, but it's more of like he was a John Doe, but it's like, how did this cult even figure out about this being all the way on the other side of the earth when...
Well, okay, diving into my nerd stuff about Lovecraft, and about like Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that, these cults are older than almost time itself, so it's almost like they just changed names, changed companies, whatever. They all did on the same thing. I wonder
how Paul got all the way to Missouri.
I'm sure that they heard about him in some way, or maybe it was all a setup to begin with. My issue with the movie happens when they're like, we manufactured you 3 days ago.
Yeah, it's like
that ruined everything.
His birthday was the day he was, like, the day he went to the Mexican restaurant. That was the day he was born, apparently.
I don't like that.
All those memories were just implanted into his head, and it's just
to make him more easily possessible and more of a worthy vessel of the Indian.
It's like we didn't get to see them do any of that either, besides just pictures of him being strapped to a chair. It's like
he doesn't remember.
It's like, how did you even do that? It's like,
I think if we cut out that that whole thing where they made him and he was just a victim of circumstance, but he happened to be the perfect vessel.
Yeah, just
and
be
then,
like he had a sorrowful thing, but it's like it's a bad thing that he did, so it's kind of like coming to bite him back.
or
almost.
even if it was like that twist where it's like after he blew into the bottle to summon the empty man claimed him as a vessel, and he was living 2 separate days almost, where it's like he would do things and not remember, like go to the temple, and that's why the speaker knew about it.
That's kind of what I thought was going on.
See, that's what I was hoping it was going to be. But okay, we're harping on this at this point. We're beating a dead horse, I think. But the point of it is that I feel like with some small cuts, you know, changing the twist around, making it more, not necessarily predictable,
removing some of the plot elements that weren't really necessary, and cut the runtime to about maybe an hour and a half,
maybe
45.
hour 45. Like, yeah. I'm not opposed to a 2-hour horror movie.
Me either, and I mean, I was hooked till pretty much the last 30 minutes.
I don't know what it is about the horror movies we've been covering lately, but it's like non-stop. I have to write notes like every 5 seconds and I lose track. Like, I don't know what happened, but Clown did it, this one did it. Like, I'm not complaining too much about the movie. It's just literally get rid of that one twist about them making him, and I'd have way different opinions, even with how like mindfucky it got towards the end.
Yeah, because like I like that.
We like 1408.
Like 1408, Hereditary, Midsommar, The Lighthouse, The Witch. It's like,
I don't mind being messed with.
Me either, but when it's just a jumble of it's like, it's dumb. It was dumb.
I think it's not the fact that I don't like this movie. I do like this movie.
I liked it a lot.
I think the ending let me down. I think that's what it is. I think
that's what I was saying the whole movie. I was like, as long as they don't fumble the ending, this is something special.
But I mean, I think if you cut out the last like 20 minutes of the movie, it's a solid movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the ending just kind of overclouds it a bit, which is really sad because we were like really invested. And I'm not saying that it's going to get terrible scores, but I'm saying it did affect the scores.
Yeah.
So I guess like that's a good segue as any into the scoring. And I'm gonna be honest, like half of my scores aren't even set in stone. It's gonna completely depend on our discussion.
Yeah, this is a movie I'd even happily rewatch it. I'd be like, let me try to pick up on some stuff.
I don't regret buying it. Let's put it that way.
No, absolutely. Go give it a watch. Because we probably didn't do the best job covering, because there's just so much that happens. There really is.
But also, you know, we're more of a review and discussion channel rather than a deep dive channel. If you want to know the ins and outs, every minute detail, you will go watch someone like Found Felix and stuff like that. So
Felix. Found Flix.
Found Flix. It's we're just gonna give you the brief synopsis, give you our opinions of it as the casual viewer. Because we don't necessarily think that we're critics, but we think that we have watched enough horror in our life to have an opinion and be able to voice that opinion and know what's good, and we know the tropes and everything like that. So that's what this platform is all about, sharing our love of horror with those that may not know it or may share it as well. Just be nerds with us.
Yeah.
And that's our opinion about it. Feel free to disagree, start a conversation about it. Like, we will gladly respond. As long as everything's constructive and not horrible. But without further ado, let's get into our scorings. So, like always, our first category is story. I'm gonna hand it over to Zombie Cat to give his scores.
For me, the story had me really hooked, like we were mentioning, for the first maybe hour and a half, hour 45. But then once you kind of figure out what's going on, that kind of hurt the story a lot. But just off of the base story alone, I'll give it an 8, just because it genuinely did have me hooked that much. I was like, what is this effigy? What is this cult? Like, what is going on? Like, I was just so hooked on figuring out what is the grand scheme of things here. Like, I genuinely was just glued to the screen until it fumbled pretty hard for me right at the end.
I gave it a 7 for story. I wanted to give it an 8. I wanted to give it an 8 up until this very moment. But, like, you giving it an 8, me thinking about giving it an 8, it just didn't sit right. I think that what I disliked about the ending really impacted how I felt about the story as a whole.
Yeah.
It just added a whole element that I just don't like. And I think for that reason I have to give it a 7, which is still high. Like, it's on the lower end of high. but at the same time, it felt wrong to give it a 5, so I had to give it a 7 at least. Now, like, the whole idea of seeing a movie that's actually really in line with Eldritch Horror and, like, Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that, I loved that. That's why I wanted to give it an 8 so bad, but...
Because to me, like, I was just thinking more on, like, the ritual as this was gonna be, like, a Slender Man / Mr. Boogie from Sinister scenario mixed with a cult scenario, but it was just so much.
I think if we took out the M. Night Shyamalan style twist, I'd have been alright.
This wasn't even an M. Night twist.
It was something else entirely. Alright, so I gave it a 7. You gave it an 8. That makes it a 7.5 for story. That's not too bad. Now, moving on to characters. There's only really one character.
Yeah.
Really. Like, if we're really honest about it. I mean, there's Nora. There's Amanda.
It sucks because I was pretty attached to the characters that had me hooked immediately at the beginning, who were...
Like Paul and Ruth and them.
I was like, this is going to be awesome, and then it just kind of stopped.
For a brief second, we thought it was going to be an anthology movie.
Yeah, there was a moment, actually, I was like, is this going to be an anthology of, like, the Empty Man, like, haunting separate stories? Like,
that would have been pretty cool, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like, let's see how it affects different people. That was just because we went through day 1, and then it said day 1 again. I was like, oh, it's going to do this for multiple people,
But it didn't go that way, which, I mean, I'm not disappointed that it
no,
didn't go
I mean,
that
it's
way.
it's a movie.
But, I think for those reasons, there's only one character. I mean, he's a good character. I liked his story.
Yeah, and he did a good job acting, too.
Yeah, I like the whole cop aspect, it brings to the table, a sense of, like, grounding and stuff like that. But, with the lack of any other character development outside of him and the people from the very beginning, I had to give it a 6 for characters. I think his character alone makes it slightly above run-of-the-mill average, which I think is even generous compared to some of the scores I've given to characters in the past. But I think that I liked his character so much that that's why I have it at a 6.
Yeah, I'd also give it a 6 because I don't care about anybody else in the movie. There's not even, like, a bad guy that I got attached to, like the punk kid who kind of seemed like he's also kind of trying to infiltrate this cult. And then there's also the preacher that I thought maybe would be a fun bad guy, but it's really just the cop. That's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's nothing... All points go to him pretty much. Not that everyone else did bad, just that he was the spotlight the whole time.
Yeah, there wasn't any room, like, with how much they had going on, there wasn't really any room for anyone else to have any character development, which is fine. But I think that the lack of caring on the other characters kind of impacted it just a little bit, because it kind of felt like the movie wanted you to care about the other characters.
Because it's like, once again, throwing back to, like, Hereditary or The Ritual, it's like you care about a lot of those characters. A lot of them, almost all of them. Like, even the bad guys are kind of like, oh shit, that's crazy.
So, we both agree.
Yeah.
So, 6 for characters. Now we move to antagonist. The Empty Man is a cool concept.
Yeah.
I think that I'm in love with the, like, eldritch horror aspect of it all, like this new Lovecraftian old one that is, like, been unearthed. I loved that idea. But I feel like I'm sorry, you're gonna hear me say it 15 times. The thing I hated in the ending has really affected every score.
That doesn't have to do with the antagonist, though.
I know, but it does at the same time, because the antagonist also feeds into cult. We have to acknowledge the
So
cult.
are you counting the Empty Man as the antagonist or the cult as the antagonist?
I think we have to include both.
So just both are the antagonist.
I mean, I feel like there's no... Because, like, the whole first half, the Empty Man is the antagonist. And then they bring in the cult, and it waters it all down, in my opinion. It really did. Like, if the cult wasn't the main focus of the second half of the movie, I would have totally different feelings about it. So, I think for that reason, I have to give the antagonist of the Empty Man, which is the Empty Man and the cult, a 6.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 6 because it goes from this was about to be like a really cool monster or just effigy and then it just turns more into human cult stuff that we've seen a million times, which once again wasn't bad because it had me so hooked the whole time. But yeah, it really just kind of falls off, which to me, I'm not counting what the cult did against it, because I'm just like, who's the bad guy here? And I'm like, do I think they're cool? And it's like, the Empty Man's cool, the cult's not that cool.
I think I'd give the Empty Man a 7, maybe an 8.
Yeah, just like this effigy that's that powerful to possess people, and it's like this god almost.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, if the Empty Man would have stayed the way he was in the first 20 minutes of the movie, it would have been an 8. Hands down. Like, no doubt about it in my mind. But I think when we include all aspects of the movie, like we have to, I think it really waters it down, so that brings me all the way down to a 6. So we both agreed on that one too. So a 6 for antagonist. I think that's one of the lowest scores for antagonists we've had in a while. Moving on to humor. There's not a lot of funny bits in this movie.
No.
Literally all my humor came from the one scene when he's standing across from the pond and he's like, yep, nope. Which for that one scene by itself, I gave it a 2 in humor.
I'm gonna give it a 1 because I didn't even laugh at that. I was like, that's a reaction that I feel like is realistic, but I feel like my reaction would be more of just turn around and scream. But
Well,
it wasn't funny at all, though. There's nothing funny about this movie, and that's once again not a bad
no,
thing.
they didn't have time to be humorous.
Yeah, they had
Really.
to fit so much in, and there's not a moment I remember being like, snarky little joke. I guess the phone thing's kind of funny. I guess that's kind of a point. Like, they're all just looking at their phones, and he's like...
I think that's a subliminal joke, though. Like, almost like it's meant to be a joke on everybody watching the movie, rather than a joke in the movie. But yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say on that. So you gave it a 1, I gave it a 2. That's 1.5 for humor. That's the lowest humor score we've had.
Yeah,
ever.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing for this movie.
Right. I mean, there just wasn't many funny parts, and that's not necessarily a critique. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Moving on to scariness. Even when it had me, I wasn't scared. I was more intrigued.
Yeah.
This is less of a scary movie and more of a, like, almost like a psychological thriller
Yeah.
in the way of, like, you just want to know what is happening.
Kind of like The Ring.
Yeah, or, you know, I think I threw out 7 at one point, which I don't know how that holds up now. But, like, I mean, I saw some, like, I was seeing a lot of kind of reflections and things like Silence of the Lambs and stuff like that with the police officer trying to uncover this plot, which I really enjoy that whole trope. And that's really good. And I think they did a good job about it at first.
Any cliche that's executed right can be done well, because I mean, there's a reason it's cliche, because it works.
Right. And so for scariness, I wasn't scared. But I think for just creativity and like overall suspense, I gave it a 6 for scariness.
For me, I'm probably going to give it a 5, because even the moments that scared me more than anything was seeing like the cult but not doing anything necessarily threatening. Like when they were dancing around the bonfire, that really unsettled me, seeing them like praying to that black poster, and just the few moments of getting to see the badass skeleton effigy and seeing the Empty Man out in the snow, stuff like that got me more than seeing the Empty Man up close. Like, kind of, it looked a pinch goofy, just a pinch goofy, like a little bit of a Spirit Halloween costume.
Hearing you talk about it made me realize I'm being a little too easy.
Because, I mean, like, it's scary, like, in a good way. It's not a bad scary. It's more... I feel like we had another movie like this where it was, like, the scariness comes in a different form.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of atmospheric horror movies, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, I'm changing my score to a 4. It's just listening to you talk about why you're giving it a 5. I feel like the reasons I'm giving it a 6 are even less than what you're saying.
Because, like... I really, like I said, it was more the distant shots that gave me the creeps.
Right.
Like, when you see the skeleton in the cave, and once again the cult around the bonfire being like, what in the hell? And then them across the river stepping in sync, like that was chilling.
I think that the horror of this movie comes in the form of the not knowing.
Yeah,
the mystery that revolves around this entity. That's what makes it scary. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Zombie Cat, for articulating what I could not.
I mean, once again, it's still pretty scary. Like you're just, it's not the typical scary, I guess you could say. It's more of like an intense scary.
Yeah.
To where I'm like sucked in, like, and I do applaud this movie for not doing fake out jump scares, because that would have made it worse for me.
Right.
Like when he found the kids hanging, that was scary. But there was no bang, there was no piano, bang, like, he just saw him and it was like, oh shit, that is more haunting than a loud noise.
This movie really does set it up like almost, it is a supernatural horror movie, but the way it feels while watching it, it almost feels more like he's chasing down a serial killer that just happens to be supernatural.
I almost said it feels like a weird Batman movie, like a really edgy Batman movie with some crazy supernatural thrown in.
So I gave it a 4, you gave it a 5. I gave it a 4 after you changed my mind.
Yeah.
So 4.5 for scariness. That's below average. I think that fits.
For this movie, once again, for this movie.
I don't think that is any reflection on the quality of the movie.
No.
I think that it did what it set out to do. It really fucks with your head.
Yeah.
Especially in the last 20
Like,
minutes.
I haven't been this glued to a movie since watching, like, well, Alien Romulus had me pretty hooked, but Late Night with the Devil is probably the last horror that I've been this sucked into a horror movie.
I don't know. You liked Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah. I just still didn't have that same, like, I can't look away kind of feeling.
All right.
I did love Rosemary's Baby, though.
4.5 for scariness. I'm pretty sure that's one of the lower ones we've had recently, too. All right. Last but certainly not least, we get into experience. How we felt about the movie as a whole.
And this is where I feel like I get to be a little positive. Like, I'm not going to give it above a 7 because the ending is pretty, I'm going to just say it's pretty trash, but, like, overall, it's sucked in and invested into the story I can give it a 7 because, like, I really did enjoy the movie. Like, 90% of the movie, I was like, what is going on? I don't want to stop. Like, like, just keep it going. Like, it could have just kept going. Like, it did drag, but it was mainly once she started figuring out, and it felt so sloppy that it loses all the, like, this had, if it stuck the landing, this could have been a 9 for me. It was that good.
I agree with Zombie Cat. I gave it a 7. I don't have anything else to add upon that except for the fact that it's only that low because of the twist I don't like. That's it.
Yeah, literally the end just kind of fumbles that hard for us, but everything building up to that, though, like I said, I genuinely did not want to look away from the screen because I was so invested. I wanted to know what was next.
So you gave it a 7?
Yeah, great movie. I would happily watch it again. Like, if there was somebody who hadn't seen it, I'd be like, let's watch it. So I'm super happy. Once again, you left us a recommendation because I genuinely did really enjoy the movie. I know it sounds like we're being super negative, but it really was pretty solid. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's just, we've covered a lot of really good horror movies lately, and I think that it's just in comparison, like these other movies
like,
that
try to compare this to something like Grave Encounters 2, and it's like,
I'd rather watch this any day of the week.
I would watch this 100 times in a row than rather watch that one more time. If you
said that I had to watch Grave Encounters again, or I had to watch this movie...
Grave Encounters 2.
Yeah, Grave Encounters 2 again, or I had to watch this movie once a week for an entire year, I'd watch this movie every week for an entire year.
And I feel like you could have fun with that, because you're like, oh, I picked up on that.
Yeah, I think that this movie could definitely benefit from a rewatch.
Maybe, like, it could be something, maybe in the future we recover and be like,
Right, we're not above giving a movie a second chance.
Yeah,
unless you're Grave Encounters 2.
yeah,
It's not happening. I'm sorry.
I'm never watching that again. I've already watched it like a few times, so.
But you gave it a 7 for experience. I gave it a 7.
Yeah,
Final
solid
score
movie.
7 experience. That's above average. So, big shout out to Holy Parish of Doom for continuously commenting on all of our videos. We really appreciate it. We have noticed, and if you want us to cover a specific movie, take notes. We really do.
Especially these kind of movies that are just very underground, because like I said, I had never even heard of this movie. I watched like a snippet of a trailer like a month ago, and I was like, looks pretty cool, and then I just kind of forgot about it, so went into this like completely blind. So that was pretty awesome. I'd love to find some more movies like this where I'm just like, I have no clue what I'm getting into, but I'm ready.
Yeah, so if you have a movie recommendation that you want us to cover, I think we have some openings in like November where we have some question marks on our screen at the moment. So if you really want us to cover something, like, just let us know. Let us know a few times. Like, the more you comment, the more we see you and your recommendation, and the more we take it into account.
And always at the end of the day, I say we're going to get to everything eventually.
Right. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Not necessarily that movie, though. But, yeah, so big shout out to Holy Parish of Doom for sticking with it, and we finally got to cover this movie for him. Or them, I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, decent movie. Go watch it for yourself.
Pretty good.
Alright, just some cleanup things. Like we said at the beginning of the video, we got some big plans leading forward into October. Our first Halloween, our first Horror Havoc here at the Horror Den is going to be really great.
We already have, we're not going to spoil what these movies are, but we think it'll be a good Halloween time.
Yeah, we cast a pretty big net, I think. So expect 4 movies and 4 creepypastas over the course of
if everything
October.
Goes to plan.
You're right. Everything is.
We are once again very busy, so we got to make time for this. So
we may be kicking ourselves in the future for this video. So
so we're at least gonna try. So
right, it's ambitious.
There might be one video that gets posted a little after Halloween, but that's okay.
But
if that happens.
If you like what we do here and you enjoy horror as much as we do, please give us a subscribe. We are very close to our first milestone. We're halfway there, over halfway a little bit. And, like the video, it really helps out with the algorithm. Comment. We love to, interact with our community.
Oh, I love chatting with fans, like just saying if they love the movie. I've had some people be like, I didn't like this movie. I'm like, yeah, I understand that.
We're open-minded.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying so hard to reach 500 subs, so the closer we get to that, the more amazing.
I feel obligated to say this. I don't. Zombie Cat didn't think that we needed to, but I'm going to anyway. So we did a 100 and 200 subscriber video. We will not be doing a 300 subscriber video because we've grown really fast, number one. But also, number two, we have a lot of big plans leading forward, and we don't want to bog it down by doing that. So, instead, our next big special after Halloween, and probably after the end of the year, to be honest, if we meet it before then, will be for our 500 sub special when we reach our first big milestone.
If you go look on our community, you might get a teaser for what that is.
Yeah, it's a really big plan. We hope that people will actually want us to cover it, because it seems like people want us to cover lesser known horror movies, and that's fine. Yeah. But we're planning on something really big that's going to take a while, so I hope that people are ready for it and people want to see it. So like Zombie Cat said, you may be surprised by the current results though. But yeah, that's kind of the plan leading forward.
And before we completely wrap up, we need to do our score predictions on this movie, which I am even kind of skeptical on, because I have no clue how that, because Foundflix said this movie bombed hard, and it wouldn't surprise me. I'm like, I could imagine I'm a casual man, and I just want to get spooked in the theater and eat some popcorn. Maybe see some jump scares because I'm super casual, you know what I mean?
I definitely think this is going to be a cult horror movie.
Yeah. I haven't
definitely
watched
believe
his video, but one of my inspirations, Chris Stuckman, just the thumbnail for his video on this movie, he said why he thinks The Empty Man should be a cult classic, and I could see it falling into that category one day.
Right. All right, D-Mac, you ready for the Rotten Tomato game?
I am absolutely ready for the Rotten Tomato game.
Okay. Well,
I have never been more ready.
Bring it on! Bring it on!
I always lose, so I feel like I have nothing to lose. So I'm just gonna guess wildly. I'm gonna say that critics gave this a 25%, and I'm gonna say that audiences gave it a 19.
That's bad. That's really
I
bad.
think that that's what people would give it. I'm not saying me. I'm saying I think that people going to the theater would give it.
Okay. For me, I'd say critics. What did you say? Probably 25.
I said a 25 for critics and a 19 for audience.
I'd maybe say like a 38 from critics. I could imagine this being pretty harsh with the audience, but I'm gonna be a little more generous and say 42.
So the Rotten Tomatoes scores for The Empty Man. The critic score is 76%.
Damn.
Wow, critics actually liked it. What is that?
Yeah, they did. And the audience score is 61%.
Wow,
Oh, that's
okay.
good. That's really
We were
good.
both wrong.
Yeah.
Pretty wrong.
That did okay.
I just want to
It's
say
good.
the reason I put my score so low is because I can imagine there are so many people I know that I could see go to see this movie and be like, it didn't make sense,
Yeah.
and like get upset about it.
It's kind of like how there's people with Hereditary that don't deep dive it, I guess you could say. Even the first time I watched one of my favorite movies, The Lighthouse, I was like, what was the hype about? And then when I rewatched it and kind of like started piecing it together, I was like, this is a masterpiece. You know
Yeah,
what I
and
mean?
that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I just don't think that I didn't expect this to be a majority cup of tea. Like, I could just see a lot of people bad-mouthing it because they didn't understand it.
I'm happy it did good, though. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
You know, good for them. Good for them.
That means they were probably more positive than we were.
Yeah, which...
Or neutral, because I'd say we
I
equally...
think y'all's scores kind of line up with the
Yeah,
between 60
pretty
and
much
70%.
60 to 70. I'd say we're right in between the critic and audience score.
What can we say? It's not much, but it's honest work.
Yeah.
We are the everyman, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually, I'd say, a fair Rotten Tomatoes score, so
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm glad that I was wrong. So, just kind of some wrap-up things. We have an Instagram, so please make sure to go follow us over at the Horridin channel over there.
And if you notice, we have 2 handy-dandy mics now, which is
We do.
amazing.
And that is all thanks to our Patreon.
Woo! You can sub to our Patreon for as low as $5 a month and help support us get equipment. We're currently using a tripod. We got a whole new microphone. We got another microphone that we're going to be using for streaming games in the far future. Maybe not far future, maybe just future. I'll say future.
We're always transparent about the fact that, like, every dime that goes into Patreon is being refunded directly back into the channel. So now let's tell you what we're actually saving for now. We're saving for a capture card.
Yep.
We did a poll not too long ago about doing a series where I am at the helm of playing horror games because I'm a wuss.
He's like, I don't get scared of scary movies.
I don't, but like once I have agency, it's just over for me.
Let him
But-
watch Smile by himself and see how he acts.
Anyway, but that's what we're currently saving for, so we'll let you know as soon as that becomes a thing. Which, I mean, I know capture cards aren't that expensive, so it might be closer than we think. But, you know, we don't know what's going to come up between
There's still a lot
now and then.
else that has to go with, like a monitor and just equipment. Just
But, like,
streaming.
if we wanted to do the video, like, bare bones it, we really just need a capture card.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you want to support us in any kind of way, we would greatly appreciate it. Just head over to Patreon. If you don't, we understand. We're a small channel. Can't really say we blame you. But, you know, that's our review, guys. And we're very happy at the rate that we're growing. We hope you enjoy our videos. If you do, just show us, talk to us. We will respond. That's the benefit of us being so small. So, you know, get ready for the big events coming up. We hope that you're ready for spooky season like we are. And just more importantly than anything else,
Stay spooky out there.